Rate rises clearly are having an effect on the way Australians are shopping and consuming. That's what they're supposed to do. The latest retail sales numbers show this today. The ABS says monthly sales rose 0.4% to $35.3 billion. Annual growth is 5.4%. The Bureau reports that sales of discretionary items, including clothing, household goods and department stores, all fell. So let's bring in here Jameson Coombs, an economist with Westpac. Jameson, many thanks for your time. These retail numbers show that 11 rate rises that the Reserve Bank has handed out are changing behaviour, aren't they?
Yeah, 100%. I think there was a lot of talk for a while there that, these interest rates aren't having the desired effect, and we're now starting to see that in the data. The data takes time, and now we've got some pretty clear signs that people are changing their spending habits, whether that's substituting away from more expensive things or turning away from, say, discretionary items to non-discretionary items. And that showed up here today. If you look at food and you look at, say, dining out, they were the categories that really grew during the month, whereas the other ones that you pointed out, those discretionary items, weren't growing as quickly. So if we look across the whole March quarter, we actually saw that retail spending was flat. And so when we account for the fact that prices, of course, are going up, and of course, we've got this record surge in migration that's currently underway. When we account for those factors, it's actually likely that spending per capita in real terms is moving backwards in the quarter.
OK, so moving backwards is spending in real terms per capita. But let's be really brutally honest here. This is what the Reserve Bank had to do. It couldn't have inflation run out of control. And let's be honest, it's been more modest, you could argue, in its rate rises than most of the central banks around the world.
Yeah, so this is definitely the objective of these rate rises, is to rein in spending. It's been running too hot. We've basically been buying things at a rate that's too much for the economy to absorb. And so the Reserve Bank's trying to rein in that spending and try and slow the economy down a little bit because it's running too hot. If we look overseas, they have slightly different circumstances and they're in little bits, different parts of the cycle to us. But definitely we are an economy that is a bit more sensitive to those interest rates compared to, say, the US and Europe, especially given in the US, their average mortgage rate is a 30-year fixed. Over here, most people are sitting on a variable rate. And so they're seeing that impact. While there is a bit of a lag, a few months, they're seeing it a lot quicker than we see it overseas.
OK, so that's the object of the Reserve Bank, to do that. But then in terms of, the hurt that's out there in the economy, while people have got jobs and while you've got a 3.5% unemployment rate, which is better than full employment, that means pretty much anybody who wants a job can get one. The Reserve Bank is tipping that to rise to 4.25% over the next year or so. That's when the hurt kicks in. Not now, when people have got jobs and they can cut back discretionary spending. The hurt comes when people actually lose employment.
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting dynamic how that, increase in the unemployment rate actually comes through. So I think a big part of it is going to be, we've got this massive surge in migration. We've got this huge increase in supply. As you mentioned, people who want a job are able to get one. And at the moment, there's a lot of people coming in who want to get a job. As that, progresses through time, jobs are going to get filled, and all of a sudden the economy is slowing on the other side of that, and businesses aren't going to want to provide that many jobs. They won't need the labour. And so what we'll see is people are going to be joining the labour market, and they basically will end up in the unemployment queue for a longer period while they're searching for that job, and potentially may not be able to get it. And so a lot of that increase in the unemployment rate will likely be an increase in supply rather than outright job shedding.
Yep.
But there will be chances we see that.
So flip it on its head. If the Reserve Bank doesn't get on top of inflation, if it's too slow with these rate rises, the long-term consequences of that are most likely going to be that Australia's economic growth slows in real terms, and secondly, that unemployment eventually rises as really businesses in particular find their own profits squeezed in real terms.
Yeah, definitely. I think the risk to the Reserve Bank getting it wrong and letting inflation getting out of hand is really large and can be really damaging. And I think the board, in their most recent decision yesterday, they kind of weighted that risk more heavily and they're a bit more cognizant of that risk. And definitely, if it does get out of hand, it means more rate hikes than otherwise would be the case later on at a time when the economic outlook is, a bit more vulnerable in that scenario than it would be if we were doing a bit more now.
OK, so then tell me about your own forecast for where rates go. Have you got any more of them penciled in at this stage?
So at the moment, our view is they hold on from here. I would say, given the guidance they gave us yesterday, the risk is that they go again if the data is particularly strong. But we would say that given they went yesterday, that threshold or that, upside surprise to the data is going to have to be relatively strong, and it's going to have to show that inflation is coming down slower than they want. They've made it pretty clear that midway through 2025 is their kind of, reasonable time to get inflation back down. So if there's signs that it's going
almost
to take
as though they're gliding the economy to that point to try and hang on to the jobs. That's the object they keep on saying.
That's the goal. That's what they're trying to do. It's a different approach to, say, the US Federal Reserve. They're trying to lock in all these gains that we had during the pandemic and get that glide path down. So get inflation down over a reasonable time while trying to project as many jobs as possible, as you've said.
Jameson, I'll tell you what, many thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. It's great analysis. And you're saying probably at the moment they'll hold on at least for the next month or so and look and wait perhaps for the next inflation data to come out. Many thanks for your time today.
Cheers.